So what is a trademark is basically the question that we're going to deal with in this video. Essentially you need three things. The first is that it has to be a sign, right? You have to use it in trade and commerce, and it has to be able to distinguish your product from somebody else. So what is a sign? A sign is something which is able to distinguish a product from something else. So the best example is a word, right? So think of the Mercedes-Benz car. It's got Mercedes-Benz written on it. That's how you know this particular car comes from that producer, right? That's the first example of it, right? So that's what's called a word mark. Mercedes-Benz, or the word Nike, or the word Coca-Cola, or something like that. The other type of sign, the other sort of mark, which is very common, is what's known as a device mark. Basically a logo, some kind of graphical representation. So think of the three-pointed star of Mercedes, or the Nike swoosh, right? Or even the ribbon on the red Coca-Cola can. So anything which is a logo or a word operates as a sign, right? Because human beings look at it and say, I actually understand that as denoting that it comes from a particular producer. So that's what a sign is. Now other sorts of signs exist out there. So for example, things like colors and shapes, right? Even sounds can operate as signs. They can operate as marks, as long as they distinguish that particular product. So an example of a sound mark that's been registered is the Harley-Davidson exhaust note on their motorcycles, right? It's a very distinctive sound. And so when you hear that, you think Harley-Davidson. Or color, for example, right? If you think of the color purple in relation to chocolates, right? Many people think of this as coming from Cadbury, right? Not from other sorts of producers. So those sorts of marks can exist, but usually it takes quite a while for them to be recognized by consumers as signs. What these particular marks typically are what's known as acquired distinctiveness marks. Because when you first see them, you see, for example, the color purple, or you hear the sound of a motorcycle going past. You don't think, oh, that must be from a particular producer. You just think, that's a noisy motorcycle, or that's a nice color. But eventually, over time, those particular signs can get the sort of distinctiveness that means that consumers think of them as coming from a particular place. You can have either inherent distinctiveness or acquired distinctiveness. So a word mark, like Mercedes-Benz, or if I come up with one just off the top of my head, Zizaji or something, then that particular word will be inherently distinctive if nobody else has used it. However, other sorts of things like colors and shapes and sounds, and even some logos, right, even some words, will only acquire distinctiveness over time. If I use the word Apple in relation to computers, the first time that happens, that's actually distinctive, right? But if I use the word techno computer or something like that, that's not particularly distinctive. But if over time people start to associate it with my particular product, then it can become distinctive. So the two basic requirements are that the mark is a sign of some sort, is capable of distinguishing, and that in fact the second requirement is that it does distinguish. The other requirement is that the mark has to be used in trade and commerce, and that's usually satisfied pretty easily. Those are ones that typically are not going to be requirements that are going to be an issue most of the time. So the thing to take away from this video, right? There are three basic requirements in order for a thing to function as a trademark. It has to be a sign, right? It has to be used in trade and commerce, and it has to be distinctive.